It had a phone, I don't know who from the water district specifically, I don't remember, had a phone conversation with the Maine CDC, asking them if there were any concerns. They got this information that the CDC doesn't recommend solar panels or batteries in wellhead districts. They're looking to get that in writing from the state. And so we'll see what they come back with. Unfortunately, there were no public comments from the public at the planning board meeting, but the planning board members pretty unanimously felt that both panels and batteries should be allowed in the wellhead in all of those zones, and that we shouldn't restrict solar installations to any of the zones in town. They also felt pretty strongly that the 30-foot front setback was unnecessary, and that any side setback was unnecessary. They did, however, agree with the 15-foot height limitation that we have. Sheds, for instance, the limitation on sheds is 14 feet, so it's kind of in the ballpark. But that was their input back to us on that. So next time we can discuss it, we can add that to the other information that we have. Just as an FYI, the state law does require anyone who lives in a wellhead zone that has oil storage tanks, if they have to replace their tank, they have to install one of the new double-walled ones, which are, an attempt to prevent any spills from that. So, obviously there comes concern. So we'll save that information for our next discussion on that. I want to thank Britt Humphreys, our clerk, for the changes that she made. You probably noticed in the format of the agenda, the font style and stuff. I think it's a lot more readable for those of us that struggle a little bit with reading. Also, just on the 9th, the Yarmouth Town Council held a meeting about the possibility of removing the 2 dams in Yarmouth from the Royal River. Though that meeting has gone by, there is a 30-day comment period. So anyone in town that would like to make comments about that has an opportunity to do so, even though that meeting's gone by. They're discussing removing both the East Elm Street and the Bridge Street dams, which would open up, they figure, about 70 miles of the Royal River, and probably there would be fish in the river here in Gray that we haven't been seen since the dams were built. Also, I wanted to, our Director of Facilities and Parks, Mo Russo, and Town Manager Foley circulated today a email about the fact that the basketball courts will be closed while they're doing the septic and all the other work here at the Pennell campus, though it probably won't be closed for very long. It sounded like it wouldn't be closed for more than a week. And that's pretty much all I had for sort of FYI things. The Gray Food Pantry is open this Friday at 1 p.m. The Zoning Board of Appeals will be meeting on the 23rd at 7 p.m. Our next Town Council meeting, everybody should remember, is the 12th. We only have one meeting in November because of the election, which is on the 5th. There will be interviews for the Economic Development Director position on the 21st.
21st of this month?
This month, yes, yeah. There was a meeting on the 9th for the Village Transformation Project. There was a debrief from our conversations here at the council. MDOT is working to finalize the edits on the plans. One of the things that they requested, and there was an email earlier today too, is that the new connector that's been proposed from the West Gray Road to the Portland Road across Center Road would only be one way from the West Gray Road. And they also proposed some other changes on Brown Street, which we'll have to get into at some point. that we'll be having a workshop on the 29th from 5 to 9 at the library, our sort of annual retreat that we've been doing the last few years. And the Historical Society also has a meeting on the 24th at 10 a.m. At 1 Main Street at their location in the old fire station. We'll move on to council correspondence and committee reports. Mike Johnson, we'll start with you.
I didn't have a ton of correspondence. The ones that I had, we had discussed last time and you had responded. Other than that, I just looking through everything just to double check. Looks like anything that I got was everyone else was copied in on as well. So no new, nothing outside of that.
Okay, thank you. Krista?
Yeah, the Ordinance Advisory Committee is scheduled to reconvene. We've had a bit of a break since our council workshop. We will be reconvening on October 21st at 5 o'clock. The Blueberry Festival Committee, I don't have an upcoming meeting date for that, but I'm sure we will have one soon or in the near future. GPCOG Executive Committee met this afternoon. We had some interesting developments on the executive committee itself. We've voted to add the county representation from county government as an ex officio seat for the committee. So they won't be having any voting capacity, but they will always be in the room as a source for regional collaboration. So that would be good. Also, Tom Bell, who runs communications at GPCOG, gave a presentation on the services he could offer in that capacity. He was encouraging municipalities, both with and without full-time communications staff, to reach out for anything that they feel they might need assistance with around communications, particularly just kind of doing an audit of what's working well and what's not for your communications, and also just strategies when things arise that are complicated to communicate to the public. He is well-versed and his staff are well-versed in pretty much any kind of media type you could imagine. So we should keep them in mind as a resource, and Kyle in particular. And then we also discussed a new strategy GPCOG is going to be kind of advocating for with member municipalities, particularly around engaging municipal representation for state legislative advocacy efforts that they're embarking on. They're kind of trying to figure out what that will look like, because they haven't really tapped into municipal reps for that quite as much as they could. So if you are seeing emails in trying to engage or inquire about what that might look like for you, just keep an eye out. There's nothing specific they're looking to advocate for right at this moment, but they're just want to use their network and municipal representatives as a resource going forward. That's all I have for committee reports. I don't have any council correspondence to report out on.
Great, thank you. Ann?
Yeah, I've had several rounds of emails with a resident concerned about the West Gray Road MTA interchange at the bypass where you get on it to go southbound. Following changes MTA made to the intersection, I've been involving Michael Foley in that, and the state legislative delegation has also been part of the conversation. Michael let us know that MDOT has made some changes, and I think that was more in terms of the light, the timing of the lights in response to this feedback, although the lane issues remain in this resident's mind. So it's still a work in progress. I've had several emails from someone pushing website services. I've referred them to Kyle. I think that might be phishing. I'm not sure. So I don't know if anybody else got those, but okay. I completed a review of several spending warrants for the town, asked several questions about just individual expenditures, and got a satisfactory response on all of them. I have no issues, and that was a good experience. I'll be participating in interviews for the new economic development position on Monday. For the VTP, I guess Dan's already provided that report, so I don't. I just will note that we are planning to meet with MDOT and our state legislative delegation later this month to kind of update them on the VTP and kind of where we are with this and where we hope to go. And that's more of a kind of a dog and pony show, really just as an opportunity to make sure we're still, as Dan would say, pulling from the same side of the wagon. Resiliency, I helped the town complete its first quarterly report on the community action grant. We received word that from our grant contact at the state that was accepted. We have an opportunity to participate in a new grant that GPCOG will apply for from the same source that would help the town create an overall sustainability plan. And so the Resiliency Committee is going to look at this at our next meeting, which is in early November. With their primary concern being to make sure that the town and the Resilience Committee have the capacity and bandwidth to provide the needed information for GPCOG. But from the initial overtures from GPCOG, it sounds like they would do the lion's share of the work. So it seems attractive. Open Space, Al Schaefer presented an updated version of the GIS map he created for the committee's use, and that will help it prioritize land acquisition, open space set-asides, and trail connectors. This represented a lot of work contributed to the town, and we're fortunate to have someone with his skills on the committee. I'm sure we'll use that tool going forward. And then for CTAC, the Community Television Advisory Committee, I just wanted to share that the indomitable Mary Sweeney Underwood has been working with Kyle and the Gray American Legion. She's, in a note to us, she mentioned that she's working toward them using Gray Community Television to let the community know what they not only offer their members, but their work in the greater community. And in November, they'll meet to familiarize them at the Gray Library with what is available to them to use to film their community activities and outreach. They hope to have many members train in the use of camera equipment, editing, and adding music and production. So that's great news for Gray, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What are some of the components of the resiliency plan? I mean, just really quickly. Do you?
The the townwide sustainability plan. It's a good question. I think it would include things like, disaster planning and, things that we are already working on, like, sizing up our culverts and things like that. But I think it's
be interesting to find out, when it comes along. Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
I received emails from Gerald Fawcett and Bruce Fauché about the meeting they had with town staff that I attended regarding Deer Acres Road and the requirements that they would need to meet to continue the discussion about possibly that becoming a town road. I received a letter forwarded from Mike Johnson to Scott Lowell, which I responded to and copied the council and the manager. I received an email from our town planner, Kristen, who had received notification from the Wyndham Planning Board about a subdivision on the border of Wyndham and Gray that would contain a right-of-way to a large parcel of land in Gray. And though within the context of Wyndham's, the request to Wyndham's Planning Board for the subdivision, it talked about only one residence in Gray. But it is a large parcel and those things can change. So it was kind of interesting. It was the first time I'd bumped into that sort of cross-town cooperation, if you will. So I thought that was, nothing may come of it on our end, but it was still nice to have that heads up. I sent a letter to Bruce Sawyer responding to a letter from him concerning the solar arrays in the BDBT and the wellhead districts. Ann already spoke about Mary Underwood Sweeney's work, and today we did get an email from Brad Foley of MDOT to our engineer Mike Thomas requesting a couple of changes to the village transportation transformation project. And so it'll be interesting to see how that, I'm not quite sure what the mechanism for making those decisions are, but that was interesting. They're trying to summarize that whole process now so that we can move it forward. I suspect Michael will have something to say about that in his report. And that's it for me for correspondence. since our last meeting. The next item on our agenda is the accounts payable and the payroll warrants. I think you've all gotten emails probably about signing the warrants. Have you received the DocuSign?
I have, but I don't know how to act on them, so I would like some background on that.
Well, I think that's one of the things that we wanted to talk about. The thought was what we could do is maybe in one of our upcoming workshops, we could spend some time just walking through that process and seeing, make sure we're sort of all on the same page. There are a lot of them that are backed up. We have a lot that we haven't done. So it's going to take a while, I think, to wade through all of that. But I think once we all understand what we need to do for the work, hopefully we can get caught up pretty quickly.
I would find a workshop valuable, just because I don't have any, I wouldn't know what I'm doing, so that would be
Yeah,
helpful.
well,
Thank you.
understandably, yeah, it
Yeah.
hasn't been rolled out to you
I
yet.
just had a conversation with Michael Foley about it.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
That helped
Yeah.
straighten it out.
The next item on our agenda is a report from our town manager. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me join remotely this evening. I'll just, to quickly follow up with the warrants, I'm happy to meet with any counselor that needs assistance with those. That's a process that the town had established in their council rules and had not been following for a number of years correctly. And so we were working with our finance director to get that process reestablished and have that review process done electronically to make it a little bit easier on everybody rather than having to come in and sign documents. So I'm happy to meet with anyone. I think my conversations with Councilor Gass were very helpful, and she was able to navigate them and answer any questions. So I'm not sure if an entire workshop is necessary for it, but if that's what the council decides, then so be it. Otherwise, again, I'm happy to meet with folks one-on-one to do that. The only other item that a couple items where I want to report on before I turned it over to our guest speakers this evening. Since our last meeting, I shared that our planning director, Doug Webster, has announced his upcoming planned retirement from the town of Gray. He served our community with dedication and excellence for nearly 17 years. Doug has been an invaluable member of our team, contributing significantly to the planning, community development, and code enforcement departments, including leading the redevelopment of the beautiful Henry Pennell Municipal Complex. Doug has notified us of his intent to retire before the end of this fiscal year, and until then, his work schedule will be reduced while he assists with the transition of duties. We are grateful for his willingness to continue supporting the town during this time and for providing ample notice to ensure a smooth transition. To facilitate this transition, we will be reorganizing the planning, community development, and code enforcement departments as part of the fiscal year 26 budget. And in the coming weeks, we will be naming an interim director to support the department given Doug's limited schedule. During this transition, Doug will focus on finalizing several key projects, including completing zoning work outside of the village, finalizing amendments to the subdivision ordinance, as well as staffing the ordinance advisory committee until a new staff member is assigned. We will work closely with Doug over the next several months to transition his responsibilities to other employees within the departments, and this reorganization will help maintain the high standards of service and efficiency that Doug has established for the town. We extend our heartfelt thanks to Doug for his unwavering commitment and contributions to the town of Gray. His expertise and dedication will be greatly missed, and we wish him all the best in his retirement and future endeavors. I did want to also mention, since our last meeting, I learned of the passing of Richard Wood and also Peter Gellerson, both who were elected town councilors for the town of Gray, as well as served on a number of other committees in the town of Gray over the years. And if we could just offer a brief moment of silence in their honor. Today, Kyle shared some information about Peter's passing on our Facebook page and website, and he'll do the same for Richard in the coming days. And then lastly, I know you mentioned real quickly about the basketball court. The basketball court will actually be closed. The current basketball court will be closed permanently, and there should be about a week or so in between where basketball hoops will be erected at the new basketball court, which is along the side of the former maintenance building. And so hopefully it won't be too long without the ability for members of the community to play basketball. And then with the VTP things that you mentioned real quick, those items were items that the committee had talked about, and they just need to be, or the group had talked about, they just need to be updated in the final plan for some tweaks to ensure that everything that has been recommended flows appropriately, and then Maine DOT can begin to work on the application process. Once we finalize things with them, I hope to bring forth a resolution for the town council to support at a future meeting. I'm not sure if it'll be ready in time for the meeting on the 12th. If not, we'll have it at one of our 2 meetings in December. And then just a reminder that October 17th is the deadline for the applications for the vacant town council position. And those, again, will be discussed at our November 12th meeting. And the department reports were included in the council packet this evening. And then I'd like to invite our friends from the United Way of Southern Maine to the podium. I met with them a number of months ago to learn about some demographic studies that they've been doing in the greater Portland area, and they wanted an opportunity to share that information with the town council as well as the public here in Gray.
Thank you, Michael.
Great. Anything I should do to turn on the mic here? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect.
Just turned it up. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you, Chair McGuire, distinguished members of the council, Manager Foley. Thank you for this opportunity to talk. I'm Dan Coyne, the Chief Impact and Governance Officer at United Way of Southern Maine with a service area of Cumberland and York counties. And tonight I want to talk to you about ALICE, which is an acronym. See if it is going to share. All right, here we go. You should be able to see it on your screens. A study of financial hardship in Maine. And so when we talk about ALICE, what do we mean? I often think about Alice from the Brady Bunch. I'm starting to date myself now. But Alice in the Brady Bunch is exactly the type of person that we're talking about. I think about the bagel I bought this morning and the cup of coffee, likely to have been a member of ALICE. If you dropped your kids off at childcare this morning or picking them up, if you have anyone helping take care of aging parents in terms of long-term care workers and so on, very likely ALICE. As you can see on the screen, ALICE is an acronym that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. A lot of folks that we would have called heroes during the pandemic that have existed for decades. It's been but largely an invisible population. That government data doesn't necessarily bear out for what is true financial needs. So I want to walk you through a little bit, and we did meet with Manager Foley earlier to walk through some of this data because we believe it paints a more accurate picture for what it means to get by rather than the federal poverty level. So here's a snapshot of ALICE in Cumberland County. 8 are those experiencing financial hardship, and I'm going to, after a brief introduction here, end up using the term ALICE to describe everyone experiencing financial hardship. But the traditional measure of financial hardship, first introduced in the 1960s, is the federal poverty level. Largely then based on a food-based budget, and while the great measure then, because it allowed us to look for the first time nationally to be able to determine a number that could determine financial hardship, it hasn't kept up with the times. So 8% of households in Cumberland County fall below that federal poverty level, what most people I think would think of when they think about what it means to struggle. But another 29% in Cumberland County struggle to make ends meet from paycheck to paycheck. And we're going to talk about what an ALICE household budget is in a moment, and I'll talk about why I think ALICE is a much more accurate depiction of financial hardship than just the federal poverty level. But what it means is almost, or more than 49,000, I was going to say almost 50,000 households in Cumberland County alone really do struggle to make ends meet. So where do they live? Alice lives in every single town, and you can see gray on here and a little bit of a slightly less blue just to distinguish. And you can see Casco and Naples, certainly near the top of the list in Cumberland County. And not every town is listed here. The font would be too small to do it, but we can get town-by-town data to determine the number of households who are struggling. Gray fares relatively better than some communities, but still more than 30%, almost a third of households in gray are struggling. I went backwards instead of forwards. And so let's talk about Alice too. Alice, as I mentioned, is in every town, but as we look at some data, we can start to see some other factors at play. Alice is in every age population, but our largest age demographic, those who are over 65, are more likely to be Alice than those between 25 and 65. And while a relatively small age demographic, those who are under 25 are also more likely to be Alice. Alice impacts every type of household composition, one parent, two parent, children, no children, but 62% of households in Cumberland County with children that have a single female head of household, almost 2/3 are struggling. And while the vast majority of households where Alice are white, given that we have a significantly white population, we also know that households led by people of color are more apt to be Alice than their white counterparts. So I started to mention earlier about the federal poverty level being misleading, that it suggests that only 8%, less than 1 in 10, are struggling. But it's misleading for a couple of reasons. As I mentioned, it is a national number, and so the federal poverty amount in gray is the same as it is in Fort Kent, is the same as it is in Los Angeles. It becomes really difficult to match up how people are actually struggling. And as I mentioned also, it's largely based on a food-based budget. It, over time, has started to try to keep up with other aspects, but not adequate enough to comprise what really constitutes a monthly household budget. So what is that monthly household budget? It is rent, utilities, childcare, if there are children in the home, food, transportation, healthcare, technology, and taxes. There is a small miscellaneous of 10% for a small swing in any one of those other categories, but this is not a budget about saving for retirement. It's not a budget for actually depositing money into a checking or savings account, and it doesn't even include a budget as I think about the playoff push I went to for the Sea Dogs at the end of the season. It wouldn't even include an amount to go to a Sea Dogs game, right? It really is the basics of what it is to get by in a modern society. And what you can see on here, and if you actually go to AliceInMaine.org, you could look at any type of household size that you want. 1 parent, 7 children, 2 parents, 3 kids, and so on. But here are 4 of the more common household compositions. And we can see that a single adult would need to make $37,000 to just have a survivability budget. In a family of 4, almost $94,000. What we would begin to see, though, and here is the gap, and this is what's staggering. That single adult, the federal poverty level, I almost wanted to ask a Price is Right, no rules game, and ask you what you think the federal poverty level might be, but it is $13,600. And this is 2022 data, I should have mentioned up front. A gap of $23,500. That family of 4 needing to make almost $94,000. The federal poverty level, the federal government would say $27,750 is all you need to make. And what I didn't share actually on the prior screen when I think about the budget, these are also conservative numbers. I actually don't know anybody that spends less than $1,400 right now in rent, by and large. Anyone I talk to, they would be like, tell me where that is because sign us up, we want to be there. And so the gap is just so enormous, and what it means, like the federal poverty level determines so much of what's available for assistance for folks from SNAP to main care benefits or what have you. But these families are largely working 1, 2, and even 3 jobs just to make ends meet. What you can see here on the screen is just a few of the more common types of professions that tend to be ALICE and the budget shortfall that exists. And again, these would be Cumberland County numbers. And I want to be cognizant of time, so I'll try to wrap this up soon. A couple more data points around ALICE. 60% are rent burden, which means they spend more than 30% of their income on rent. So for any of us, I know when I think back to the mortgage that I secured, that was a determining factor whether I could get a mortgage. A bank saying, or another financial institution, you shouldn't be spending more than 30% of your income on housing. 60% of ALICE families are spending more than that 30%. Almost 90% have 3 and 4 year olds who aren't enrolled in preschool. And more than a quarter don't have access to high-speed internet in their homes, and we think about that in a modern economy. Just a couple more statistics about housing, because we know that that is the issue that many are talking about, and certainly is related to childcare, food, and so on. Burdened on these two slides means they spend more than 30%. Severe means they spend more than 50% of their income. So a third of ALICE households end up spending more than 50% of their income on housing. This slide would just show you that the ALICE population is growing at a rate significantly faster than a non-ALICE population in the state. And when we think about Maine has seen some net in-migration in the last couple of censuses, especially in 2020 in the pandemic, and people realizing the secret that we've had here about what a great place it is to live and work and retire here, we still do see that ALICE population growing at a faster rate. And just to essentially almost wrap up, part of this is sharing. We are right now talking with different towns and different organizations about ALICE and sharing this information, but also wouldn't be remiss, I suppose, if I didn't feel like what I'm not here is just to paint a dire picture of people who are struggling and then just kind of walk away. We want to partner with towns, GPCOG, others to figure out what we can do together, but United Way does offer some types of programs, and just want to mention a couple that could be of use for anyone watching if they need help, or certainly any of your constituents if they reach out. We do run Keep Me Warm, which is a statewide heating assistance program that we run every year to provide assistance when other forms of assistance like LIHEAP have run out. We have a program called Women United that's working with many of single parents and their children. We have something called Cash Greater Portland, which we run in partnership with some other partners. Anyone making below roughly $64,000 will know the exact amount in the new tax year. We will do your taxes for free as part of having some IRS certified tax preparers volunteer with us. Right now, we only offer that in our office by and large in Portland, and we're trying to look to expand that beyond, so stay tuned. But if you have any constituents who make less than that, please encourage them to call us to sign up come January. We also run a program with the other United Ways called 211, which is a 24/7 health and human services information referral system that you can get someone connected to help if they need it, if they're worried about running out of heating assistance. Maybe they actually even have a cousin that they're worried about a mental health issue and they live in Dover, Foxcroft, but they're your constituent in Gray. They could call 211 and call on behalf of that cousin in Dover, Foxcroft, and be connected to resources up there. So we do also run a program 24/7 called 211. I can get this to click, and I'll just mention too that ALICE was sponsored by the John T. Gorman Foundation, and here you see a research advisory committee. These aren't United Way made up numbers. Certainly we have a research advisory committee of some statewide folks, and we're part of a larger national effort started by United Way in northern New Jersey to paint that picture. We're about 30 states strong now as part of this effort. So I just want to thank you for listening. Happy to answer any questions, and also a resource offline to help if we can ever be of assistance.
Yes, Ann.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. I think it's really excellent data and so important to clarify that the federal poverty level is functionally meaningless in terms of helping understand how many families are really struggling. I just wanted to check with you about a couple things. The people of color households that you mentioned, especially blacks, I think, are primarily immigrants and refugees. I think these days, I mean, at least they came to this country as, originally, or their parents did. And I think that's an important distinction. I got into a big fight with HUD about this some time back when I was working on a project, a fair housing kind of project. And it's important to understand, because it's more complex than, an issue that, where we've just sort of are parking families of color in public housing, say, and forgetting about them or something like that. I mean, a lot of these folks have come to this country with very little, and they've done amazing things. They've educated their kids, and their kids are going on to be part of our workforce. The parents are as well, and we need them. But I feel like that's an important thing to understand. And I just had another question. Why are so few Alice households enrolling their young children in preschool? Do you have any idea?
Well, I think part of what it is, it's multifaceted. I think one of which is there are not enough high-quality childcare slots available. And the pandemic certainly made what was a tenuous business model to run a nonprofit childcare anyway even more difficult in terms of trying to balance state subsidies under the Child Care Affordability Program, which is it's been renamed, to help support a revenue model that can meet a mix of household income needs. But also, we've been working at United Way for the last 15 months with some companies in the area to look at their childcare needs, and we surveyed about 2,000 employees. And as I recall, about 300 of them indicated, respondents on the survey, that they have a spouse or partner at home who would be working but for the cost of childcare. 85% of those 300 who said that overwhelmingly said that was the reason. And so there are these factors at play that I think both get to, it's unaffordable, there may be a wait list, there aren't enough actually providers in the area for an ecosystem to do that. And we hear that a lot of providers have significant wait lists, for example. And anyone I talk to who's almost going to be a new parent, they're like, the first thing we got to do is get on a wait list right now, because it might be 18 months, or it might be 24 months to get something. And so I think that there are multiple factors at play that get into that, including a more difficult business model.
Yeah, that's important. I think, and I in one of my other hats is I serve as chair of Maine's Permanent Commission on the Status of Women, and the child care issue is one that we've tracked pretty closely, and that's certainly been our understanding as well. On that note, I'll just shut up after I note that I wondered whether or not on the Alice website, whether Alice in Maine website, whether you break down the data a little bit more by gender.
We do,
Okay,
and
excellent.
actually we will show the exact number of at a town by town level, we can't break that down, but we can tell the number of households in gray, for example, the exact number of households who would be in financial hardship. But we do have a lot more broken down data online.
Okay.
I mean, you could look at actually by town, you can look by legislative district, you can look at the data in a bunch of different ways, and disaggregate more deeply than what I've shared here.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
Any, Krista?
Yeah, I just want to also thank you for that, all this information. It was enlightening, to say the least. Just the vast difference between, which, I mean, I think I was ostensibly aware about how the federal poverty level was really very unrealistic, but actually seeing these numbers is somewhat shocking. One just question I had about the resources the United Way offers on your second to last slide. Do you find that the municipal general assistance staff are utilizing these resources? Have you found do you do outreach to general assistance in each community, or?
We try, and part of, I think, what this Alice data is allowing us is to have maybe some conversations that we weren't having before, to be able to say, we're here as a resource, especially 211.
Okay.
I know I have shared that information with some general GA officials, but not all.
Mhm.
And so that's something that we're happy to help share if that's helpful here too.
Yeah,
But,
I mean,
yeah.
I can't speak for our representatives personally, but I would imagine that these, you know, being able to refer people to these specific things, if they come up and we don't have the funds or they're not eligible for some reason here locally, that these would be useful.
Great. Michael, Mike Johnson, did you have any questions?
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you so much. This is great information. I did write down some notes and I have a few questions. What is it that we can do to help you, first of all?
Oh, I love that question. I almost feel like I could have planted you there, Counselor. No, I would just thank you for that. I would just say, as you think about anything you might do when it comes time for just kind of town-wide planning, or thinking about what it might be for like allowing for the permitting of types of affordable housing, and could childcare be co-located in those spaces or not, to think about the fact that there's actually a significant number of households in gray that happen to be in financial hardship that the official measures won't pause it and think about, to say, so could this, ask us yourself, if you think of it, could this help an Alice family, so to speak? I think is just a great first question to ask. I think with that, second would be to encourage any of your constituents to, first, I think maybe 211 is the best resource that we certainly help lead, to get connected to a resource, to always encourage them to call there. They're there regardless of income status, actually, and so somebody who maybe is in need, whatever their household income, they're not being asked, what's your household income when you call 211? They want to connect you to the right resource. You can do that, but third is, as you think about having to undertake any community engagement sessions or think about work that comes ahead, feel free to give us a call, and if we can be of help, we would like to be. And so it's just, I think, thinking to give us a shout, and I know Manager Foley has my contact information and can share it, but happy to try to be a resource.
One of the things you mentioned is childcare and preschool. I know in Gray we've got a pretty decent preschool program. Do you think part of it is spreading the word and letting people know that it is out there in towns that do offer a preschool program that's, town initiated?
Yes, I imagine, I don't know the particulars on the ground here in Gray about what the participation rate might be and why it might not, but my experience with other types of programs, sometimes it does just come from a lack of maybe knowledge that it exists, and so I think that's a great start to be able to do that.
Okay. And the last thing I had is just, getting back to what you guys do offer. I want to encourage, especially for heating assistance, it's going to be a tough winter, I think, for a lot of people. As you mentioned, looking at rent, I've got a son that graduated college a couple of years ago, and, if he could find an apartment for $1,000 or $1,400, he'd be out pretty quickly, but that's not reality for most. So I think this winter is going to be real tough for a lot of people, if there's anything else that, do, please reach out to us, because we'd love to promote the United Way as much as we can.
Thank you so much for that, Counselor.
I had a few, are you all set, Michael?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
I had a few questions. When you undertook your study, did you look at the reasons why these expenses were the way they were? Is that part of what you looked into?
Yeah, I think part of that's a really interesting question, Chair McGuire, is part of it was looking at, as I understand it, because we partnered with this national effort, which was a recognition that there wasn't, the uniform measure didn't account for places where cost of living would be much higher, and that then saying things like the CPI, like let's look at what the inflation rate would be, this massive basket of goods, if you might actually see minimal movement there, but in these core cost categories, you might see massive increases that would be masked because CPI is such a big bucket of goods. But a thorough analysis to say, here's the decades-long trend of why housing has become more difficult to attain. The report doesn't really go into that type of factor analysis of the deep whys. I think we could probably all speculate why that might be the case. I think what these reports do is just to say, here's what the data has been, here's what the trend is telling us, here's what it means for families who are struggling.
Yep.
But it doesn't so much pass a conclusion on the why.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The state mandate for pre-K is a relatively new one. I also think, as part of that 90%, I suspect that there's a philosophical component there too. I'm pretty confident that even if we had young kids today, my wife and I wouldn't be sending our kids to pre-K. It's just one more year away from home in school. When I think that, the environment that we can provide is even better than what they would find in pre-K. So I think that probably is a part of that 90%, but how big a part is impossible to tell. And I also think with the childcare issue, I think the state regulation and state mandates have had a big impact on one of the reasons why there are fewer childcare providers than there used to be. The standards required by the state to open a childcare, the standards they have to meet, were pretty onerous, so that the people that maybe had 4 or 5 kids or 6 kids really haven't been able to meet those standards. And so I think we have to be careful about making a difficult situation more difficult by some of the regulation that I think gets created with great intent, but the ultimate impact of that is that we lessen the amount of services that are available to people. And I think that hits people that are living with the kinds of income that you're talking about even harder than people who have more means than that. And also, I think it would be interesting, I know a lot of the state programs and some federal programs now, I know you use the poverty line, but many people can participate in those programs at 1.5 or 2 or several times the poverty line. So as far as a measure is concerned, it's not necessarily an accurate measure, because I think while we haven't perfected something better perhaps than the way we measure poverty, I think even at the state and the federal level, there's been recognition that that number's low. So a lot of services are available to people who are above, and sometimes fairly far above, that number. So that it would be interesting to understand a little better how those changes in the way the government's providing services to people might change that 8%. And it might be much bigger than the 8% because of that. But Mr. Klain, thank you very much for your time. It is, as everybody has said before me, it's really interesting information. And it's nice for us to have an opportunity to present it this way, because it gets recorded as part of our meeting, and other people can have access to this information later. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you so much, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Before we move on, Town Manager Foley, I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to add to your report or this part of our agenda?
I didn't. That was the last item on the report.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
The next part of our agenda is public comments on non-agenda items. The limit is 3 minutes per person. The public is invited to address the council on any item of business not on the agenda for tonight's meeting. Citizens have the right and are encouraged to speak during public comment regarding items not on the agenda, or regarding an item. At the time in which it does appear on the agenda, we'll have time for people to make those comments then. I don't see anyone online, and there isn't anyone present here in the council chambers, so we'll move on to the next part of our agenda. We have no old business on our agenda, but we do have some new business. The first is Resolve 2425-11, appointing Seth Dolinsky to the Recreation Committee. The proposed motion, be it resolved that the Greytown Council hereby appoints Seth Dolinsky as a regular member of the Recreation Committee with the term expiring on August 31st, 2027. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion Krista, second Ann. Are there any comments?
Just want to thank Seth for reapplying. I see that he's been on the committee for a couple years now, and we certainly appreciate his time and his effort in continuing in that role.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to second that and also say I've talked to a bunch of people lately who are concerned about their taxes. They're concerned about, some people are concerned about the direction the town is going in. The best possible way, or one of the best possible ways, if you have those concerns, is to participate in our local town government. We have positions on council committees that are open, where people's time and effort would be appreciated and would be very valuable. We also have a council seat that we have to fill, as was mentioned earlier. We currently have 4 applications for that one seat, and honestly, that's music to my ears. I would like to think that anytime we have an opening on a committee or on the council, there would be a rush of people who would like to fill those vacancies. And doing so does allow you to participate in the town government in a way that's different from just voting, and it does have an impact on our taxes. So thank you again for volunteering.
I'm just going to jump in and say, for most of the committees, the commitment is like 1 meeting a month. It's not really a lot.
Yes, I think sometimes people are concerned about making a commitment because it would be, more time that they could spend, but there really are a variety of committees with a variety of different, that do a variety of different things, and I'm sure you would be able to find a spot on one for whatever time you can make available for us.
Yeah.
With that, we'll go to a vote. Ann?
Yes.
Krista?
Yes.
Michael Johnson?
Yes, sir.
And I'm also a yes. Thank you very much, Seth, again. The next piece of business is Resolve 2425-12 to countersign the notice of election for MSAD 15. The motion be it resolved that the Greytown Council hereby countersigns the notion of election calling the Maine School Administrative District Number 15 district referendum to be held at the Newbegin Hall at 22 Main Street in the town of Gray on Tuesday, November 5th, 2024, for the purposes of determining the questions attached. And I think everyone probably has received a flyer from the school district about the items that, the 3 questions that they have on their referendum ballot for this November. I'll open it up to any comments that people would like to make or questions.
Do we need to make a motion?
Oh, we do, sorry. I'll take, thank you.
Sure.
Yes, I'll take a motion in a second.
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you, Krista and Ann. Now we can do any comments. Do you want to start? Do you have anything to add, Krista?
Yeah, just to clarify, the questions are for a bond referendums. There's 2 of them for the school is seeking. I think most of the community, as Dan said, has received informational flyers from the district. I just want to clarify for the public, and maybe Dan will want to comment on this too, that the council is just a partner with the school district in getting these questions on the ballot, but we had no say or authority in how they've been framed or voted on. So.
Yes, and anyone else have any comments they want to make or questions? Yeah,
I did have,
Go ahead, Michael.
sorry.
No.
No, I did have one. I've seen some chat. I just had a question for you. One of the questions people had, and I don't know if it's our place or not, was I know it's expensive to the mailings. Is that something the town paid for? Is that something the school paid for, or was that a private?
Oh, yeah.
How did that work? For
That was
mailings
the school
on
district's
that?
expense.
The school district.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, take Krista's,
Mr. Chair?
yes, Michael.
I just wanted to just simply explain the matter. It's simply something that we're required to for the to sign for the municipal clerk to administer the election for it. So essentially, we don't have any say as the municipality in whether the question can take place or not, or whether we support or don't support the initiative. So just wanted to make sure that that was clear at the beginning. It just simply refers to the municipal officers countersigning it, so that way the municipal clerks of the municipalities will administer said election.
Yeah, thank you for making that crystal clear. It is a really kind of a formality on our part.
Yeah.
More than anything else. I have had a bunch of questions around taxes and this spending and on the town's relationship. And to be honest with you, I've been a little bit surprised at how much people think we're involved in the school district. The town has a responsibility to include the cost of education in our tax bill and to collect that money for the schools and to give that money to the schools. But it is the state statute that governs the process that basically forms the school's budget. The town meeting, the ballot with no, budgetary figures on it, a simple yes, no, all of that's dictated by the state process. And as Manager Foley said, it's not anything that we can control or have any influence over whatsoever. So, but we do run the elections, and our town clerk runs those elections for the school district too. So any other last minute comments? We'll go to a vote. Michael Johnson,
Yes.
Krista,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes. The next order of business is order number 2425 it says -11 on the agenda, okay. An amendment to the parking ordinance, chapter 502. The motion be it ordained by the town council of the town of Gray, Maine, and the town council assembled to amend chapter 502, the parking ordinance as recommended by the town manager and the public works director. We've talked about the ordinance changes on a couple of different occasions, but Manager Foley, do you want to speak to this?
If you want to take a motion first, and then I can introduce the item.
Thank
if you
you
allow that.
for, thank you for the prompt, yeah. I'll take a motion, please.
So moved?
Ann
Second.
and Krista. I've got to start inserting that piece before we move on to other things. All right, yes, thank you, Michael.
Thank you. At our meeting earlier this year, the public safety chief had requested the no parking at Seagull Drive. And so we made that amendment. And while we were making that amendment, the council had asked us for second reading to try to clean up the parking ordinance itself. And because we had advertised the public hearing, and the public works director and I hadn't had enough time to do all the work to review that ordinance to ensure everything was appropriate, I had indicated I would bring that back at a future meeting. So this is that item returned to you, which is, it's a significant cleanup, and I'll just quickly run through the ordinance in general. The revised one is the first one, and I provided the whole old one so you could see how kind of disorganized it was. And so at the beginning of the ordinance, we better organized it to have general parking restrictions, some of which were included in just a list of parking restrictions that existed for various different locations, and there was no rhyme or reason or order to them. So none of these really are new. I just created the section called general parking restrictions and put all those ones in those first 1 through 4 items. The track changes was a little bit difficult in this one, so that's why I wanted to show the old one as well. And then the other one that we added, the other section I added was section B, which is winter parking restrictions, because some of those were incorporated in just the list of parking restrictions. And then the only one that we hadn't had here in the town of Gray that the Public Works Director had sought to include, and I figured I'd include this with these broad changes, was that the Public Works Director has the ability to declare a snow emergency. So that wasn't anything that previously existed, though the town had the other two restrictions before as part of the parking ordinance, number 1 and 2 under the winter parking restrictions. And then lastly, I created the specific parking restrictions section C, which is we have a no parking zone, which is Schedule 1, and a parking restricted zone, which is Schedule 2. And so if you look at the old one, there was a number of them that the Public Works Director and I reviewed, some of them that no longer exist or need to exist, and some of them that we made better points of reference, because some of them referred to poll numbers, which don't really exist as much anymore when poles get replaced or damaged. And then also we clarified them to utilize actual addresses and street locations to ensure that those are documented appropriately for each street. And so the Public Works Director and I physically visited every single one of these locations to ensure that they are compliant and in order and reflective of the intent of the ordinances previously. So that's the changes in a nutshell. Again, there's no major changes to the ordinance itself. It's just better organized. Oh, and then the last section I forgot to add that's new is the Sheriff's Department had advised us that in the town of Raymond, so we're going to be working with the Sheriff's Department once this is finalized to develop a ticket, a municipal ticket that the Sheriff's Department can then issue. And they had also indicated in the town of Raymond, they had authorized folks other than the Sheriff's Department to do like essentially issue a parking ticket or a penalty. And so we added that this ordinance may also be enforced by the town manager or their designee. So that way I could assign the Public Works Director who gets assigned a lot of them in the town of Raymond to enforce parking restrictions. And all they're able to do is issue the ticket with the fine, but they're not able to administer things such as removal of the vehicle or things of that nature, because those are authorities that lie within law enforcement responsibility. But this would allow us to be able to, if we have a regular offender, say, for instance, Seagull Drive, if somebody were to park on Seagull Drive on a regular basis, the public safety chief or the Public Works Director could come to me with that violation, and I could authorize them to issue a violation simply through the municipal ticket that we would establish. And that's the ordinance's changes in a nutshell.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments? Ann?
Yeah, I just a couple of, I thank you for that helpful clarification about how you were sort of restructuring and making it clear. I do think that was helpful.
Yes.
Those changes. I'm just curious, have there been issues, especially in winter? I mean, I could see there could be issues for snow plowing, for example, especially on some of those named roads. Are you aware of that a regular issue?
For the parking ban?
Yeah.
Well, so the town has a parking ban that happens all the time, which is between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m. from November 15th to April 15th.
Right.
So that is, people aren't allowed to park on the street during those hours. But when there's typically a major snow event where it's going to probably last a lengthy amount of time, the Public Works staff, in order to be able to safely plow the roadways, they need to have them clear. A lot of municipalities in the region and in our area declare those in advance of the storm, so everyone knows to have their vehicles off the roadway. A lot of times, the regular one that we have may not be enforced on a regular basis if there's not a snow event, and so sometimes people don't get used to the fact that they're not supposed to park during those winter months, and because we don't have a regular law enforcement patrol 24/7, we aren't able to always do that or enforce those violations. And so that tool allows the Public Works Director to let local news authorities know, post on our website, provide notifications that there's no parking due to the snow emergency on roadways in the town.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, at a guess, do you have any idea how many, or has Public Works shared with you how many vehicles might get towed in a given winter season because of people parking on the roadway?
I don't think we have a lot of that data
Okay.
because we aren't necessarily the ones that administer it. I could work to get that data from the sheriff's department as they would be the folks who help assist us in removing vehicles. It doesn't happen too often. It's just it's a nice tool for the Public Works Director to have to be able to clear the streets. If the council, I know that's not something the council had originally asked me to do. If that's something the council doesn't want, we could maybe bring the Public Works Director in to discuss that at more length with some more data.
Yeah, I was just sort of interested to know to what extent that, I mean, obviously in a larger city, that's, it happens all the time. I've been towed when I've lived in other cities. So that was one question. And the other question, I guess, is just how do we communicate with vehicle owners and residents of Gray that these bans are in effect. And I certainly, you mentioned news media and the website and things like that, but if people aren't even aware that if they move to town and they aren't even aware it exists, I just wonder if this is a regular problem, if it makes sense to, send a note to especially those property owners on those named roads.
You wanted to send a note to all the property owners about the parking ban?
Well, I was thinking, especially on those named roads, the roads that are identified in the ordinance.
Those aren't specific to the winter. The winter parking ban would apply to all roadways in the town.
All roadways, yeah, townwide. Well, I think I'd like to see it at least in the All About Town newsletter and maybe on the signs and things like that, because I feel like it's important to be transparent about that and give people that information in advance.
Well, these aren't.
Yeah,
these aren't
we'll do
new-
our best.
These aren't new streets, though. These were already streets that had parking.
Yeah, I understand that. My point is that if I move to town and I'm not aware there's that this ordinance exists,
Yeah.
I might not know and until my vehicle gets towed or something. So
Well,
it seems like a courtesy.
You're all done?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Krista.
Well, I was actually, one of my questions was gonna be, and maybe it would help Ann feel more comfortable about notifying people. I would just wanna make sure that we have no parking signage in all of these locations that we've noted. I know Seagull Drive had some new signs put up, because that was a recent development. But I drove by some of these locations today, like on Gray Park, and I think there's a sign, but it's all worn away. So we might just want to do an inventory of whether there's no parking signs in these,
Yeah, those signs would be
on the
good.
signs, in these locations that have already, have no parking.
Yeah, so as part of the work that the Public Works Director and I did, we evaluated that, and we
Okay.
have that list, and we just wanted to wait until they were adopted, and so that we can, now that we have the clear locations and the addresses and not the distances and pole numbers and things of that nature, now we can properly post them, and that will be a project our Public Works staff will begin working on in the coming months.
Okay.
That's great, thank you.
And I had one more.
No, absolutely,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Also, I just noticed, not just, but as I was reading this, under the penalties section on packet page 55, we talk about establishing a fee in the town's fee schedule. Do we have a fee for people that violate parking bans currently? 'Cause I don't think we do.
No.
No, so there's that's language that we added. And because the sheriff's department was concerned that in the old one, it was like a broad number, I'll find it. It said that be punished by a fine not less than $10 and no more than $50 for each such violation. And they've asked us to actually set a violation.
Yes.
So
All right.
I'll be working with them once this ordinance is adopted to determine the appropriate fees, and then we'll come back to you with amendments to the fee
Okay.
schedule and the draft ticket.
Okay.
That the town will, not that the council has to adopt the draft ticket, but all these ordinances will be cited on the ticket, and
Okay.
we'll establish that fee schedule.
Great, that makes sense. Thank you.
Michael Johnson, do you have any questions?
I had a lot of the same questions about signage. And then the penalties, but also enforceability. I heard, and I don't know what's true and what's not true in the past, that we can give out tickets, but it's hard to actually enforce them because we don't actually have a police department. I know these are real small tickets and our goal is not to collect revenue from these, but Mike, what is the enforceability of these actual tickets?
You're correct. The enforceability is really voluntary. It would be up to the town to prosecute the individuals with unpaid tickets in civil court. And so we would, if we had repeat offenders that had racked up a lot of tickets, then we might pursue that. But we're not optimistic the courts would be of any assistance. So this is ultimately a goal, is to just get voluntary compliance.
It's just a deterrent is really what it is. Okay, all right. And then my other question was in regards to you being able to issue a ticket. Why don't we just, my thought process is that I have no problem with you giving authorization to have a ticket issued or the Public Works Department. Is there anybody else that would need a name? Why are we going so broad with anybody that you name?
I think because there could be situations where the code enforcement officer might have to do it, the public works director, the public safety chief. So we just made it that way so that we could designate them as they happen. Otherwise, we could include every potential position in the ordinance. That way, if whoever's the town manager wants to specifically designate only one person that can do parking enforcement, then that can be the person to do that as well. If for some reason that was something that ever took place, for instance, if there was more activity in the village and we had on-street parking in years to come, then there might be an organization that might help with that or something to that effect. So it kind of leaves that open in for the future in an effort to try to limit making changes to the ordinance on the regular.
Anything else, Michael Johnson?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
I have a couple of things. First off, Michael, thank you for taking this on. This is kind of extra, I think. Our ordinances, like so many other documents, get written over a period of time by a whole variety of people, so it's good, I think, periodically to have one person with one voice sort of go through the whole thing and organize it, which you've done here. I have to remind us that when we make suggestions about changes that we want to see in the ordinance, we have to remember that we got to get at least the majority to go along with the change before anything actually changes in what's been presented tonight. I also think, I agree completely, I think having the town manager be the person to authorize whoever it is that can do this makes the most sense, rather than trying to identify who those people are up front. We've actually tried to move away from that on a lot of ordinances, just because whenever there needs to be a change, then it has to come back to the council, and there's not really a lot of value added to that. I want to add just my own 2 cents worth. I think of signs in many instances as just another form of pollution. They serve a purpose, but I think sometimes you can go a little bit overboard. I'll take the signs out here that we have up here that are all sort of 5 feet tall and hide this beautiful building from the people that are out in the parking lot. I think they could all be 4 feet off the ground because we don't pile snow up there, but that's just my own personal preferences. The communication thing, I think, is inevitable. I mean, we have the newsletters, people are able to sign up for things. I'm sure if there was a snow ban, there'd probably be an email blast to all the people there that, I mean, those are kinds of things that I think the town staff would just do naturally. And then as far as the snow, declaring a snow emergency, I think that one's important, because remember, with the change in the ADU statute, we can't require off-street parking for ADUs. So you have an instance where if ADUs flourish over time, there needs to be some mechanism to get people to get off the streets. And I think that would be particularly important on smaller side streets where some of the ADUs probably will end up being. So those are just my thoughts. I'm prepared to vote for all the changes here. And like I said, I appreciate you taking the time to put this together for us.
My pleasure.
Any other comments before we vote? All right, Ann,
Yes.
Krista,
Yes.
Michael Johnson,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes. The motion passes. That is the end, or all of the new business that we have for this evening. The next part of our agenda is public comment. There is no one besides ourselves online attending the meeting, and thank you, Kyle, as you can see, and there's no one present here with us tonight. So we'll move on. We have no referrals. As far as upcoming meetings, the council retreat, as I mentioned earlier, will be on October 29th at 5 p.m. at the library. There will be a council workshop on November 12th, followed by a meeting at 7 p.m. That is our only meeting during the month of November because of the election. There is no executive session scheduled for this evening, so I will, unless anyone else has any other business, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
Michael, all right, motion, Michael Johnson, second, Ann. All in favor? That's unanimous. We
Wow.
are adjourned.
Shocking.
Thank you.